Hello, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining SISA's webinar, Work from Home, Implications and Strategies to Remain Compliant with PCI Standards. My name is Adi, and I will be your moderator for this session today. Hope everyone is safe at home and are maintaining social distancing, a very important aspect at this time. So the background of today's session is due to sudden changes in the market, there is an immediate need to shift the business process to work from home. Since SISA is a recognized QSA under PCI Council, we would like to share a few guidelines, suggestions, and strategies to guide you through these challenging times. I would like to start off with a brief introduction about SISA. We are a global security specialist serving across all industries since 2006 with a footprint of more than 35 countries. We have a unique expertise in payment security and forensic investigations. We are one of the few PFIs in the market. SISA has an exceptional combination of services and products that help organizations in maintaining robust security postures. SISA is also a member of GEAR Committee of PCI Council. Top 20 organizations across the globe are member of this committee as of today. I would like to introduce our speakers for this session. Today we have with us Mr. Rishi Rajpal, who heads the information security globally for Concentrix, a subsidiary of Synnex Corporation. He will be representing the industry today and will be providing his insights, challenges, and implementation guidance from a business service industry perspective. We also have with us Kaushik Pandey, the principal consultant at SISA and also a QSA, who will be taking us through this webinar session. Before I handed it over to Kaushik, here are a few housekeeping tips for you. This is a 60-minute webinar, 50 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of Q&A session during the course of this webinar. All attendees will be muted automatically to enable the speakers to present without interruption. Questions can be asked during the course of this webinar, and it can be done by typing out your questions. Please use the Q&A option located below your screen, where you can start typing your question. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded on SISA's website and on our YouTube channel. Over to you, Kaushik.
Thanks a lot, Adi, for that. And on the same note, I'd also you can wish that all of you are safe at home. So let's start this webinar. We can know only that we know nothing. And that's the highest degree of human wisdom. Of course, this particular quote is from War and Peace from Leo Tolstoy. And I guess that should be the very beginning of this particular session. Because the pandemic in which all of us are in, the pandemic which we are facing, I guess none of us even in our dreams would have thought about it, right? So these are those unknowns, these are those unknown threats that we never saw it coming. Many of you who are from the risk and compliance background, and have seen the risk assessment being done, you will understand that over here, the assets are the people like you and me. The threat is this pandemic, the COVID virus, the COVID-19 virus. And the vulnerabilities are our immune system. And if you'll see how exactly organizations, or let's say countries and the governments, how exactly they're trying to tackle this particular risk scenario, is that they are trying to make sure that the asset is as far as possible from that particular threat actor, because they cannot control that particular threat. They cannot have a particular security control mechanism which would be able to, let's say, reduce the likelihood of occurrence of threat over here. And that's why they want to make sure that the assets, the people, are as far as possible from this particular COVID-19. Now, on the same front, all of us would also understand that we do not get a pass on cybersecurity during crisis. Many of you would have seen that FBI recently, we can say, issued a warning, a guidance about the phishing attacks. It is being, let's say, the phishing attacks are not just, let's say, impacting the global organizations from an IT perspective, but they are even targeting the healthcare, the hospitals, and recently they even targeted the WHO as well, the World Health Organization. It means that we are in a very convoluted threat landscape. And all of us, or let's say all of our organizations, need tactics, techniques, and procedures to tackle through these types of situations at the end of the day. And that is the very reason why exactly we have come up with this particular webinar. Now, this particular webinar doesn't focus specifically on a very general practice, what exactly can be followed to make your PCI DSS compliant. But this particular webinar is more niche, is more focused towards, let's say, getting you compliant, getting you secure in this particular scenario, let's say in this particular circumstances in which you and me both are in. So in this particular webinar, we'll be discussing a lot about the importance of the data security. We'll be discussing about the risks, the vulnerabilities, the organizational assets that can be impacted, how exactly PCI DSS would be able to help the organizations in, let's say, reducing their risk exposure, reducing their measure of risk, or reducing the risk value. And then we'll be discussing about the PCI DSS security controls, which you, or let's say your organization should have to remain PCI compliant at the end of the day. So when we were drafting the entire webinar session, what we thought was that let's discuss the problems and the challenges faced by the organizations, faced by the community, faced by the industry as of now, and then start solving it one by one. And that's why when we were doing our research, we found that, okay, SINET itself has done a pretty extensive research, and they have understood, let's say, they have come up with this particular theory or this particular, let's say, results, that most of the attacks which are being happening right now across the globe, the attackers are strictly focusing on stealing the remote user credentials. And they're also focusing, or let's say their threat actors, the threats are also towards weaponized email attacks as well. So that is the very reason why you will see that there's a highest peak in Italy that went from over and above 70 between February 15th and March 15, 2020. Now, phishing attacks are used to actually steal these, let's say, the remote user credentials or the remote users which are connecting day to day. And why exactly is that particular use case? It's because these teleworking agents, or these work from home agents, many a times were not even familiar with the different sets of technologies that they have to use today, because they were never used to this particular kind of a scenario that, okay, they will be able to work from home as well at some point in time. So this particular awareness which lacks at this particular point in time helps these types of attackers, helps these types of, you can say, the intruders in getting access to the credentials by using the phishing attempts and all those things. On the other hand, if you'll see the emails, these, let's say, the weaponized emails which these guys are sending, you'll get to know that actually only, you'll say only 21% of the emails actually contain the malicious executable. Means these are the normal emails, the normal phishing emails which you and me both, you can say, are used to. Whereas now the attackers, the intruders, are using the advanced techniques as well. Like if you'll see, 32% are using macros, whereas around 12% are using Office exploit. Around 35% are using malicious website links. And around 21% are using malicious executable, which can be downloaded on your system, and then they'll be able to do many stuff on your system. So the organizations, or let's say the entire globe right now, is facing these types of challenges. And why exactly they are facing these types of challenges It's because this particular security threat, this particular, let's say the threat actors cannot be controlled by any of the, let's say, world organizations or any of the security controls which were in place. And that is what cyber attackers actually look out for. And the best possible asset, or the best possible, you can say, target for them as of now are the remote working people, or the remote working agents. So based upon the studies, actually 86% of these remote working, or let's say the remote workers, actually clicked on suspicious attachments and links. 58% actually emailed companies documents to personal accounts, which I guess you and me both are pretty familiar with. And 78% of work from home employees access documents unrelated to their role. Means they went way beyond the access metrics which was actually given to them. So these types of challenges introduces us so much risk, so much exposure, so much vulnerability. At the top of the mind, the maximum risk which we foresee is the exposure of the PII data, the personally identifiable information, which can include the card numbers, the CEV2 values, or the CEV values, the PIN values, which are being used for performing transactions, the SN numbers, the social security numbers, and all those things. And something which can be of medium sensitivity can be the customer's name, the expiration date, the IP address, the date of birth, the login details, and all the other things. Now, these are the exposure points which these types of agents or these kinds of teleworking agents are accessing every day and night. And the attackers, the threat vectors, the threat attackers are actually trying to exfiltrate these types of elements from their systems at the end. Now, what are the vulnerabilities over here which we are trying to target? It's just like their premises in which they are working. Now, those are not the office premises in which you and me work, right? Or let's say we used to work some time back. Those are uncontrolled in nature. You might be having a few disgruntled employees as well at the end of the day. A few of the employees might lack the technical knowledge so that they won't be able to distinguish between that, okay, what is Facebook.com and what is Facebook with OO.com. They might not know the difference. And lack of monitoring of these devices will also have a huge impact. I remember when actually I did the assessment, I do the assessment every now and then. I see most of the organizations don't want to monitor their endpoints, don't want to monitor their laptops, their desktops and all, because they say that, okay, my systems, or let's say my data is actually on the servers. Why exactly would I even need to worry about these endpoints? And that is the challenge right now which the organizations are facing, that they didn't took into perspective that, okay, these endpoints at some point in time will be used for the teleworking, and at that time those things will be let's say a crucial attack vector. If you'll see the studies, if you'll see the recent studies, at that particular point in time you'll find out that there are so many commercial password managers which are vulnerable to fake applications. So many zero-day vulnerabilities are on rise as of now, and of course these are being fixed as well, a few being from Trend Micro and Microsoft lately. And if you'll see the percentage, then the IT security professional poses a risk of around 65%, because they were able to access many of the documents, many of the stuff which they were not supposed to. Means need to know basis was not actually followed over there. And based upon these challenges, based upon these problems which the organizations are facing, so many of the security controls were being affected, starting from the access control, whether it's the physical or the logical, coming down to the logging, which talks about the audit trails, about the network security, about the incident management, the system hardening, and the contractual agreements. All of these different security domains got affected because of these many security challenges and the epidemic in which you and me both are in. And that is how we came up with this particular webinar, so as to take PCI DSS as a baseline security standard, and help organizations in understanding that how exactly they will be able to maintain compliance and security at the end of the day by implementing PCI DSS requirements. Now, many of the requirements which we will discuss over here might have gone over and above the purview of the requirement of the standard itself. But we are trying to implement, or let's say we are trying to, you can say, give you consultation, not just towards compliance, but even the security. Because at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you are secure, or let's say your organization's data or your customers' data is secure enough in nature, so that these security practices, all of these PCI DSS requirements just comes as business as usual. So now we can discuss about the requirements of PCI DSS and how exactly it needs to be implemented. Now, if you'll see what exactly we have seen so far, we saw that, okay, there are so many challenges across the industry where they are talking about, let's say, the vaults being compromised, the password managers being compromised by fake applications, the spear phishing and the phishing emails coming across, the weaponized emails coming across, so many countries being affected. And we also saw that, okay, how many domains or how many security controls are actually in jeopardy because of this particular pandemic. So it's very important for us to understand that, okay, how exactly PCI DSS as a standard, as a security control, as a requirement would be able to help address these different types of risks, these different types of threat scenarios into my organization, and make sure that, yes, we are secure at the end of the day. So starting with requirement 1, which talks about network security, it's very important to deploy personal firewall softwares on these types of systems. When I say these types of systems, it means that teleworking agents. Whatever systems they are using, they should have a personal firewall software, and the configurations on that particular personal firewall software should be such that they are not user configurable. None of the users who are actually using that particular laptop should be able to change those settings at any point in time. Those should have some specific inbound and outbound rules being configured, so that they should be able to connect only with their corporate network. Because from their office, or let's say from their home, they should be able to connect to your corporate network, and from your corporate network, they can go to the customer's premises, or let's say to the customer's VDI setup in many of the use cases. So they should have a whitelisting of all the inbound and the outbound rules or the IPs through which they can connect at any point in time. Similarly, when we have covered the network security, now it's very important to talk about that particular system, laptop or desktop, whatever we are talking about over here. So in this particular case, hardening plays a crucial role. And that is why we are advising all our customers that you should come out with an updated hardening document for these types of teleworking agent system. Get it approved, get it scanned, and get it authorized by your organization, and take reference from SANS, NIST, and the other guidelines which are available right now in the market. Harden your systems in such a way that they can only be used for your business purpose, for the organization's business purpose, and nothing else whatsoever. Don't even open a small caveat on your systems, because that can jeopardize the entire security of your entire organization at some point in time. And the same hardening standard should be used for all the work from home agent system. As of now, the exposure, the risk exposure in which we are, I will suggest all the organizations to have the same image, the same base image, which is hardened enough to be used across all of them. I would not suggest you to, let's say, give some leverage to a few of the people, or let's say a few of the users, just because they are managers, or let's say they are the leads and all those things. I will say, have a hardened image, have a hardened base image, and use that particular thing throughout for each and every person. On the same note, these systems which are used right now for the teleworking agents, these should be in proper asset inventory as well. Many times, many of the organizations are also using BYOD. So in that particular case, make sure that these systems are a part of your asset inventory and you do not operate on their operating system image. You should deploy your own operating system image and use it over there with all the strict security controls, and these systems will be a part of your asset inventory as well, because sooner or later, whenever you will be going ahead for your PCI compliance, at that time you will be showcasing that, okay, these assets I used for that particular time amount of period in processing the card data, or let's say in capturing the card data at some point in time. Now, as many of you might be knowing, that it's not allowed to actually store the card data on a particular personal system, or let's say a particular laptop or desktop. So on the same note, the only requirement from requirement 3 which comes into picture is of the masking of the PAN, the masking of the card number. So many of you must be knowing that, okay, the maximum permissible is first 6 and the last 4 digits of the card number. So please make sure that whatever card numbers are exposed to the teleworking agents, or let's say to the work from home employees, they can only see maximum first 6 and the last 4 digits of the card number. And of course, they shouldn't be allowed to copy paste or move anything from the organization, or let's say from the VDI setup, or from the customers, you can say application servers, on their own local desktops and laptops at any point in time. Now, once we have talked about data security, now we have to talk about data security at the time of transmission or at the time of network. That is why we are suggesting all the organizations to actually use SSL VPN connections, which should establish from their endpoints, or let's say from these work from home agent system, and go till the organization's firewall, or let's say wherever they'll be having these, let's say the SSL VPN concentrator being established in. And for all the outbound connections, whatever you will be having, or the inbound outbound connection, whatever you'll be having, configure those systems to only use TLS version 1.2. Make sure that all these connections, whatever is going in and out, actually goes through your firewall or through your proxy server, so that you can monitor the entire traffic. Because at the end of the day, there are intruders, there are man-in-the-middle attacks which are possible in many of the scenarios, and you should be alert in all those things. We should also make sure that these work from home agents do not have access to their personal emails at any point in time. They should not be allowed to send out emails at any point in time. And in case if your emails, or let's say work from home agents, or let's say work from home employees also have access to emails, then you should have a DLP in place as well, a data loss prevention software in place, so that they can detect and block any exposure of the card data if detected at any point in time. So what we have seen so far, we have seen that, okay, let's cover the network first, the network base first. Post that, we covered the system hardening. Post that, we cover the data security, the data at rest, and then we cover the data in motion. Now, on the same front, as Ari initially told us, that we have an industry leader over here who have been implementing all these PCI DSS controls from, I think, more than a decade or so. Okay, they are implementing PCI DSS controls from way more ages. So we would like to take their, you can say, insights as well, that when they actually interacted with this particular kind of situation, and they started implementing these solutions inside their organization, they started giving the systems to the work from home agents and all, that what all impact, what all challenges, what all implementation changes did they foresee. So on the same note, I would like to invite Mr. Rishi on the front, and would like to understand that how exactly you tackle these personal firewall software problems when you implemented the very first time on the work from home agent. Rishi, can you just provide some insight about that?
Yeah, and thanks, Kaushik. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is keeping safe. So, and I will go a step further, right? So, in office and bricks and mortars, our assurance is high because we have some level of control on what's happening on the floor. You have your trusted employees, and then you can put in controls for monitoring and stuff like that. But as people move out, I mean, the controls have to be more. which is mandated by PCI, and some more controls, right? So some of the best practices I can share is that, which worked for me, is stop treating your desktop as an immovable asset. So if you treat your desktop as a movable asset, that they can be sent home and start working. Now, if you look at overall control framework and what Kaushik was talking about, your desktop is really acting as dumb terminal because entire processing is happening at servers or high-level servers, call recordings and all that, right? So you're moving desktops. So you're moving the same controls which are there in Office to home with same firewall policies. Now, some of tips I can share is that generally in Office, you configure or you harden your workstation so much that your firewall and antivirus do not take update from internet. So you have to update the policy before they leave so that they start taking updates from internet directly or your DMC. Second, what level of visibility do you want, right? Right now, antivirus may not be enough. That's called basic hygiene. You want an additional level of control, which is endpoint detection and response. You may want to consider an EDR. Okay, so EDR will provide you some more enhanced visibility, quarantine facility, containment facility in case you feel anything has gone wrong. God forbid, if you went into an investigation, you have to prove how did you contain the system. So that's the proven way. Some of the other stuff that you can look at is really device management. As you send people home, inventory is one thing. What if your PC is not returning back, right? Obviously, one risk is that you will lose an asset, and I know asset does not have a value. The physical asset does not have any value these days. What about information processed on it, right? You want to provide an assurance that whether you are able to wipe off that data, have you hardened it enough so that you can really wipe off data and make it like a brick for the end user. So those were some of the best practices on this specific requirement, Kaushik. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Rishi, for that insight. And on this particular, let's say at this particular point in time, if you guys have any questions, you can start shooting with respect to requirements, which we have covered so far. So that's how we will be going ahead. That is, in every 4 requirements, we'll take a pause. We'll talk about the real world scenario, how exactly, let's say Rishi has made sure that they are PCI compliant, or I should say that, okay, they have gone over and above the PCI compliance at the end of the day. And at that time, we'll open the floor for questions as well. So I guess we have got a question, all right. So in the meantime, we get to see the questions. I think right now the most important thing which is happening across the market, that security is leaving the data center. Many of you might agree, many of you might not agree with this. But security is seriously leaving the data centers, the cloud setups and all, and they are moving to the edge. When I say to the edge, it means these, let's say the applications, the mobile applications, the laptop applications, the desktops and all those things. And that is where, let's say from I guess a Gartner study, what they said was that you should have a secure access service edge, or let's say what they call it as SISA. Also, they also talk about the zero trust architecture as well at the end of the day, which should be in place for all these types of scenarios whenever we are talking about edge devices. So on the same note, I guess we have a few questions in hand. So first question is, how do we articulate the risk for work from home agents in our risk register? As per my understanding, the risk will vary based upon the exposure of the card data which you are giving it to them. If you're giving them the first 6 and the last 4 digits of the card number, then the risk is less. In that particular case, you'll be documenting all the security controls which you have put in place, as rightly being said by Rishi sometime back, about the EDR solutions, about the personal firewall configurations and everything. Okay, and then take a risk acceptance, or let's say a risk approval from your customer whose data you are processing at the end of the day, and of course your own organization as well. However, I would like to see if Rishi has some more comments on this. Rishi?
Kaushik. So basically, one thing has to be remembered, right? There can be technical solutions to some of the problem, and some risks have to be managed administratively. From the customer's perspective, you will have to clearly call out that you are changing the locations of delivery from X to Y, and there are some inherent risks of working at home, right? Call those out and call your controls out that we are putting additional controls in it. If you are comfortable, then we'll move, because at this situation, I can tell you, I can guarantee customer is willing to sign anything, right? Because he wants to see his operations working. And I'm not saying we should make use of it. We should be prudent enough to provide them at least if same level of assurance as we would have provided in bricks and mortars, right? So, and I've seen customers from all segments giving approvals for work at home, for different work at home solutions. It can be picking up your machine, working from home. It can be laptop, it can be VDI solution, it can be virtual PC. I mean, we've seen at least 10 different flavors, but from a risk, there are some inherent risks we have to call out, inform the customer, get their sign off. And in the coming slides, I will talk about how to cover those inherent risks administratively. Back to you, Kaushik.
Thanks a lot, Rishi. Thanks a lot for that particular insight. And means, of course, whatever Rishi said is absolutely correct, that you have to take the risk acceptance from the customer as well. And of course, the customer at that particular point in time will be looking at the controls which you have implemented, which should be over and above the PCI DSS, because right now you are going in a territory which is not being controlled by you. You're going to, let's say, the particular work from home employee less premises. But again, coming back on the same thing, you have to trust somebody over here, right? So you have to trust that particular person, and just, let's say, let you know that, okay, what will security controls you have implemented from a technical and from a policy standpoint, and accordingly go ahead with the same. This risk assessment, or let's say this risk, we'll be covering in requirement, let's say 12 again. So if you have any other question from a risk assessment standpoint, then you can just wait till requirement 12. We come to requirement 12, and accordingly we'll be able to, let's say, get it. We have one more question, which says that if work from home users had no access to the PCI scope while in the office, then would any additional protection be required for them while work from home, except for maybe additional education? In our case, all work from home users only have access to our back office, Google Cloud and Amazon resources, but not the PCI scope. So in the case when, let's say the employer, let's say the agents or the system do not have access to the card data, then of course they might not be a part of the scope. Again, I'm saying these people might not be a part of the scope. Now, if these people are actually the administrators, or let's say the admin who are actually working on the servers, on the cloud setup, on the AWS setups and all those things, then of course these people will again come under the scope, and the same requirements what we have discussed so far will be applicable onto them. However, if those people are not the administrators, they are not accessing the PCI DSS scope, and those are not a part of, let's say, the PCI DSS scoped people or the department, then of course you do not need to have some PCI level controls from them. At that particular point in time, you can just follow these requirements or these controls as a best practice at the end of the day, and makes the best use of it.
And Kaushik, let me just enter here, right?
Yeah, please.
One thing should be very clear, right? This is a PCI call. We'll all talk about PCI, but why are you implementing security? You should not be implementing security for the sake of compliance. Security is implemented, compliance will be automatically achieved. So yes, you're right. If you're not dealing with very sensitive data or personal data, you can be relaxed a little bit, but just don't do it because the standard is asking for it. Just implement security because that is required. Back to you, Kaushik.
As usual, greatly answered by Rishi right now, that absolutely. Compliance is a byproduct. And of course, security is something which you should be looking for. And of course, compliance will come automatically. We have another, you can say, question which talks about that, are there any guidelines published by PCI which are available for industries to use for implementing in their organizations? Now, I'll answer this in twofold. One is that there's been recently a blog that has been published by PCI, which talks about these teleworking agents, and they have even mentioned over there that it's basically from the information supplements, if any one of you would have seen, about the teleworking agents, which I guess came in 2018 or something like that, I believe. And I'm not sure on that, so please don't quote me. But yes, there's an information supplement for, let's say, the BPO and for the teleworking agents. The same level of control, they are mentioning it over there. That's the first answer. The second answer over here would be, let's see, PCI DSS is a general standard which is applicable to all the organizations, whether they are storing, processing, and transmitting the card data. It is applicable for the organization when they are in-house, and they're applicable to the people when they move out of the organizations, are connecting remotely, as we are discussing it as of now. So at that time, a QSA's perspective, or let's say a QSA's insight, will rather be more, you can say, applicable and will be more suitable as the case of any of the information supplements, because you have to understand that it's a standard. It has to be common for all. Whereas when the QSA takes a particular standard, the QSA actually, I should tailor that particular standard based upon the applicability and based upon the scope that they are going to assess. So that's why in this particular case, soon enough, PCI might be able to come with new information supplements which specifically talk about that, okay, how to tackle these kinds of things. But it's better that you consult your QSA so that they will be able to give, let's say, a specific, a focused answer towards your PCI DSS scope, rather than getting through any of the, you can say, information supplement. But of course, information supplements provide you great way of actually architecting a solution at the end of the day. Absolutely, I'll agree with that. Rishi, you want to add something onto it?
Not really, Kaushik. I think you covered it.
Sure.
We'll cover the requirements anyway in the coming slides.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be covering that. All right, great, awesome. So I guess we have covered that. Let's go to the next slides. All right. So once we have seen the data security at rest and data security in motion, what exactly the next thing comes across in the mind is about the system security, about the security of the system which is actually being used to access these are the teleworking agents, or let's say the work from home agent system. The first thing which comes under mind is the antivirus, the anti-malware agents. From a PCI perspective and from any other perspectives, we recommend that, okay, all the systems should have an antivirus which are updated and should be in a running state throughout. And none of the people should have an authorization to actually alter these configurations. They should be configured to run the scans, the full system scans daily. And as and when the updates, the new signatures are available, it should be downloaded onto that particular antivirus. Okay, or let's say the particular antivirus agents at the end of the day. This can be best achieved that if you are connecting your antivirus to your central AV server back at your data center, or let's say your office, and accordingly getting the signature updates and everything as and when it's available from the vendor. Now, once we have understood about the antivirus, it's very important to understand about the security vulnerabilities which are happening across the base. Requirement 6, or let's say specifically requirement 6.1, where they specifically talk about the different security vulnerabilities, different threats which are happening across the, let's say, world. Map it with the CVEID and see if those vulnerabilities, if those threats are actually impacting your system components or the applications which you have, let's say, installed on top of your desktops or laptops which you have given to these work from home agents. At that particular point in time, you'll get to know that the security controls which I have implemented, like an antivirus agent, or let's say a personal firewall, or let's say an EDR solution, or let's say any other solution inside the market, is it well enough? Is it good enough? Will it be able to, let's say, circumvent, or let's say, will it be able to prevent the security of the data, the security of the system over there or not? Okay. So it's very important to understand the different threats and vulnerabilities which are happening across the globe, map it with the asset inventory. When I say asset inventory, it means even the applications, the operating system, everything which is there on that particular system. And then evaluate the controls which you have deployed on top of it, so as to make sure that yes, your system, your laptop or your desktop is secure enough at the end of the day. And you also have to make sure that these work from home systems are actively patched. So when I'm saying actively patched, it means that let's say if I think just a few days back, Windows, let's say Microsoft came up with a 0-day patch as well at the end of the day. So even those types of patches should be actively installed. And that can only be achieved if your these agents, or let's say your work from home agent system, are actually actively connected with the backend, or let's say with your data center. At that time, from a WSU server, or let's say from BigWig server, you will be able to deploy the patches on these systems as and when required. So once we have talked about the antivirus, the anti-malware engines, the patching, and of course the risk ranking approach which PCI prescribes, it's very important to understand the access as well. That what exact access should be given to these types of work from home agents. Now, as I told you earlier during the let's say the initiation itself, that have a base image, have a base operating system image, circulate it to all the people whosoever will be using it remotely to access the PCI DSS scope, and have the common controls implemented over there. So on the same front, you should have an access control matrix in place where you should be mapping that, okay, these types of agents which are working remotely as of now are able to access what all resources. And it should be based upon the need to know basis and the least privilege necessary to perform their job function. Because I guess I told you in the very starting that the IT security professionals actually poses a risk of about 65% out of 300 that they were able to access documents and files and folders which they had no idea about, or let's say they were not authorized, or they were not authorized to access those file systems at any point in time. Now, on the same front, once we have talked about the policy which has to be implemented, the next thing which comes across is the technical access controls which has to be implemented. Now, that is not something which is a rocket science today. The password security requirements, which are like 7 alphanumeric, or let's say 8 alphanumeric, something like that, the session timeout, let's say your password reset policies, all these things are, you can say, common across the organizations, and PCI DSS itself gives a very detailed explanation about these requirements. So the same thing has to be implemented for all the work from home agents as well. So entire requirement 8, if I'll talk about, the entire requirement 8 has to be implemented based upon the applicability on all the work from home agent systems and their user IDs at the end of the day. Something which is, let's say, which comes under picture when we're talking about the work from home agents are the multi-factor authentication or the two-factor authentication, which might not have been implemented once they were inside your premises. Because the PCI DSS requirement strictly say that, okay, if I'm an admin, or if you are a root or somebody with an admin privilege, then of course I should have a two-factor authentication. Or otherwise, if I'm connecting remotely to my PCI DSS scope, then of course I should have a two-factor authentication in place. Now, two-factor authentication can be implemented via many technologies which are available, let's say, across the board, and I will not name them at all. However, just one particular thing which I want to communicate when we are talking about the implementation of multi-factor authentication is that the second factor of authentication, whatever you are getting, it should not come on the same system on which you are entering the username and the password as the first factor. Now, that is not something which was actually documented in the standard, but that came as a separate information supplement. And there they specifically mentioned that the communication mechanism for both of these things, the authentication method for both of these things, should be on separate. That is, let's say if you are entering the username and the password on your system, on the application on your system, then the second factor should come via mobile phone. Okay, so the communication methodology over here is different in nature. Okay. That's the first thing. And secondly is that if, let's say, you are entering the username and the password, and at that time itself it said that, okay, wrong username, or let's say wrong password, something like that, and it didn't even prompt you for the second one, that is the multi-factor authentication. So even that is the wrong implementation. You should first of all enter both of them, and then it should say that, okay, let's say the authentication has been failed and all, so that the people, or let's say the agents or that particular person, should not be able to understand that, okay, what was wrong. Was it the username, password, or the OTP, or let's say, or that particular the second factor authentication which you are using. These are a few of the security tips which you should keep in mind once you are doing. And one more thing which we recommend across the board is that change the password frequency. The password change frequency for these types of work from home agents at the end of the day. Impose the most stronger ones, like let's say PCI gives leverage to, let's say, 90 days. I will say that give it for 30 days, or let's say 15 days, something like that, once you are working in these critical situations. On that particular note, I will again, let's say, open the forum for questions, and we'll also try and understand from Rishi that what all challenges he faced while implementing these security controls, these security requirements in his organization. Rishi, would you want to comment on the access controls, the patching, and the other ones?
Again, access control and authentication, right? So obviously, one tip I can give you is it has to be two-factor, and as Kaushik said, it has to be not on the same device. Now, it can be a hard token, it can be a mobile token, right? Secondly, on the patching, how do you patch or how do you manage today your roaming workforce? Every company has roaming workforce. You will have to figure out a way to treat them as roaming workforce as your managerial staff, right? And either you patch it through your DMZ, or you do it, or your Windows update, what temporary change you want to do, so that either your SCCM or whatever patching management solution you have, or a big fix or whatever, is able to reach these devices. One tip is has to be full tunnel. So if you do a split tunnel, you always run a risk of browsing inappropriate sites while you are connected to corporate. Now, look at and go a step further, right? What if I'm not connected to VPN? Can I do everything on my computer? I would still like to protect the PC from malicious sites, security risk sites. So have a system in place, have your local content filtering CASB engine running, so that you can still protect people from uploading data to cloud apps, which are very, very common these days, Dropbox, iCloud, OneDrive. So you should deploy an agent so that you're protected offline as well as online. And full tunnel is, I would say, it's not really mandated. I don't know, Kaushik is the best person, but full tunnel should be mandatory in a teleworker agreement. Back to you, Kaushik.
Thanks a lot, Rishi. So full tunnel is actually not mandatory, but now you are hearing from somebody who is actually on the other side of the table, and they know best because they have been implementing these security control, these requirements at the end of the day, and they are telling that, okay, a full tunnel is something which let's say should be required, or should be implemented across. So I guess you should take a note of it, all of you who has joined in. And apart from that, because requirement 6, if many of you know, also talks about web application firewalls and the applications and everything, not directly related, because I think nowhere in PCI as of now they're talking about, let's say, phishing and these types of attacks. However, if you'll see right now, the phishing attacks are a huge concern for decision makers and influencers inside the organization, especially the CIO level and the CISO level, and all those people. They are strictly monitoring these phishing and the ransomware attacks and everything. I guess today itself, I read an article which said that there was a fake app of COVID-19 itself, which in its description told that, okay, we'll be able to track that, okay, how many COVID-19 cases are coming up and this and that and everything. And as soon as you downloaded it and you provide all the authorization and everything, it would lock your phone. And then it would say that, okay, pay me $100 through my PayPal account, and accordingly, I'll be able to open your phone at that time. All right, so these are the different types of fake ransomware, let's say fake apps available, which let's say are doing these ransomware and the different types of things which can happen to a system as well. It's not just let's say a mobile phone, but it can happen to any of the systems as well at the end of the day. So I guess we have a question. Okay, fine. All right, so I guess we can move on to next if we don't have any questions in hand. I believe we don't. All right, so let's discuss about the requirement stack. So till now we have covered about the data at rest, the data at motion, the hardening of that particular system. We have talked about the network security controls which has to be implemented. We have talked about antivirus. We have talked about patch management. So it means that now we are on the peripheral. Now we are on the peripheral security. We are talking about access controls and everything. So on the same front, let's talk about a few other peripheral controls, which are physical security. Now, physical security is something which organizations might not be able to implement this particular scenario. Now, if you'll see the PCI DSS, whenever they were talking about, from PCI DSS standard, whenever they are talking about remote teleworking agents, or let's say the remote network access and all those things, they didn't specifically talk about requirement 9. If you'll see the entire requirement 9 from requirement 9.1 to requirement 9.10 and 11, at that time you'll find out that okay, they don't specifically talk about remote teleworking agents. So what we would request, or let's say what we have been prescribing to all the let's say organizations who have interacted with us is that there should be a physical security control, let's say AUP, acceptable usage policy, or maybe a sign-off, which should be taken from all the work from home employees at the end of the day. Okay, this should be drafted and this should be signed off at the time when you are allowing them to work from home from here onwards. Please do not rely on the older ones which were there, or let's say which they had signed once they joined your organization. That is not what we're talking about over here. This is a crucial case. There is an incident, or let's say this is something which we are doing to manage an incident, or I should say as a BCPDR process, we are doing it. So everything has to rerun, or let's say everything has to actually be revised at the end of the day. They have to revise that, okay, what knowledge do they have at that time, and how exactly they have to make sure that the workplace on which they are working at their home should not have any paper, pen, should not have any mobile phones, should not have any of the other stuff which would have been there, let's say, which was prescribed when they were working from the office as well. Okay, this is something which they have to make sure for that. And this particular sign-off should be managed, let's say, should be managed and maintained every now and then. Now, on the same front, one of the organizations also came up with a particular, you can say, setup where they would take, let's say, a photograph of the entire workplace, and then accordingly they are sending it every day to their, let's say, to their manager, or let's say whosoever is monitoring at the back end, that yes, they are able to maintain it. You should also document each and everything minutely. Like, let's say if you might be using a hotspot at your home. Now, at that time, the hotspot might just be very near to your system. Now, you have to make sure that it's documented inside these particular policies, that the let's say these types of hotspots or the mobile phones and everything are kept well away, let's say 6 feet distance from the systems at that point in time. Okay, of course, they will be having such a reception that yes, they'll be able to cover, or let's say your system will be able to connect with the Wi-Fi network. That's not an issue at all. But these are a few of the security tips which you should be documenting once you're signing off these particular policies. Similarly, you should be able to make sure that, let's say, the audit trails are monitored and tracked at the end of the day. Okay, and your central SOC team basically respond within the RTO, the recovery time objective, which you guys might have defined at the end of the day. You should also make sure that your work from home systems actually connect with the NTP source so that the time updates are, you can say, accurate on the system. Of course, the organizations who are using an Active Directory or a domain, of course, will be taking the time updates from there, which is well enough, which is not at all a problem. But please make sure that the NTP, or let's say the time updates, are frequent enough and consistent throughout. Now, once we have talked about the audit trails, once we have talked about the logging mechanism and everything, the next thing which comes under mind is the VAPT, the Vulnerability Assessment Pen Test Exercise. Now, these work from home agents might be, let's say, deployed, or they might be using an extension of the Office VLAN, let's say, from your own network. That is one use case. The second use case is that these guys might be just, let's say, working on their own PCs, on their own systems, something like that. At that particular point in time, make sure that the base operating system image on which you supply to these particular work from home people should be properly tested. VA and PT should be done of this particular base OS image once you are shipping it to these work from home agents. And make sure that these, let's say, operating system images are also checked every month. Now, PCI says IVA has to be done every quarter. Now, what we are prescribing is do it every month. See what will security patches, what will things have been, let's say, have been updated. Accordingly, patch each and every system, and then rerun those tests, rerun those IVA, so as to make sure that the operating system image is always intact and always secure enough. Now, when you are running these tests, please make sure that the maximum applications which you have given access to, these types of employees, are actually deployed on this OS image when you are testing it. Otherwise, what will happen is that, let's say, a few of the applications, third-party applications which you're deploying on top of the base operating system image might be vulnerable, might be non-patched, or they might be unpatched, and that might lead to security risk, the security vulnerability at the end of the day. So please make sure that all the applications, or let's say all the third-party softwares, are actually deployed on top of it. And we also recommend to have a host-based intrusion detection system or a host-based intrusion prevention system on these systems, okay, on these endpoints once you are deploying. Now, based upon the VAPT and the testing practices, what we came across, the last requirement which PCI talks about is, of course, the requirement 12. The requirement 12 is the policy which is about the governance. The requirement 12 is the policy which talks about the information security policy, the risk assessment, and all those things. And that's where, let's say, that is what drives this entire work from home agents scenario. It is very important to, let's say, do a risk assessment, a thorough risk assessment, so that all the assessed threats and vulnerabilities, or all the risk scenarios, whatever are there, are documented and communicated to the customers. You should also update your AUP, acceptable usage policies, because these people might not be using these mobile components, and they should know the acceptable usage of these systems. You should also ask them to sign off the roles and responsibility documents again, that they should revise it, they should understand it again, so that there should not be any caveats at the end of the day. The IS awareness, the information security awareness, should also be communicated, or let's say should also be well drafted and sent across to all the work from home employees. And they should know about this phishing and let's say spear phishing and the ransomware, all those types of attacks, so that they are well aware about these types of security threats and vulnerabilities. You should also prepare an incident response plan, because if, let's say, something happens from a system of a work from home agent, or say on the work from home agent, there's a malware or something like that, of course, you'll be disconnecting them from the network, from your own network and all those things. However, you should also have the policy which Rishi discussed in the very starting about the BYOD policy, like let's say a remote wipe functionality and all those things should be there, so that the data, which Rishi rightly pointed out is the most important asset right now, can be erased from those systems if that particular system had, let's say, access to the data. And it is also advisable to conduct a tabletop testing, so that all the people who are responsible for incident response at this particular point in time should know their roles and responsibility, and should be available 24/7 in the case of any of the challenges, any of the incidents being done. So on the same note, we'll again go to Rishi and try and understand that, okay, what will security controls they have implemented based upon these, let's say the governance and the VAPT and the other exercises. Rishi?
Yeah. So governance is really important because it's easy to send people home. It's difficult to monitor and have a governance framework, right? So the good part is that all the security tools are cloud native these days, all the leading EDR companies. So you really didn't have to worry much about it, because you can really get data from the cloud, fetch into your SIM and get alerting, right? So you immediately know if somebody's trying to act funny and doing some malicious stuff. So immediately have a governance process. What happens? What is the alerting mechanism, severity, and who will act on it, right? So that has to be very, very clearly defined. Teleworker agreement, very important. Physical security, we all know that you cannot get the same level of physical security in action at home, but you can always have administrative controls. Get a teleworker agreement signed. Depending on your risk appetite, you can get it signed weekly, daily, monthly, or at the time when you are sending people home. Now, this teleworker agreement has to be a little language-wise, has to be written very, very, I would say, depending on the geos you work on, right? Because some of the regulations will not allow some things. Something like right to audit, so that you have a right to audit. You have the right to visit to a person place in case of investigation. Implement collaboration tools. There's a lot available these days where you can TL or whosoever is supervisory staff can really monitor the space that the person is operating on. Some people have implemented a daily snapshot of the workstation image sent to the manager. Depending on, I mean, it depends on the organization, but that is an administrative control, not really a technical control, I would say. And when it comes to European countries, you can't really have right to audit. Right to audit has to be with consent. So keep that in mind. You may have to have different teleworker agreements or a global agreement which caters to these requirements. Some people have gone to an extent that while you are working, your Alexas and your Google Home should be turned off. So those are some of the learnings that we've learned through on working with different customers. Your mobile phones are not allowed. And I mean, I can go on and on to an extent that there are solutions available for banking and financial institutions, which really offer you proctoring. So while the agent is working or person is working on a machine, if he takes out and takes a picture, the manager will get an alert. So again, not every solution fits all, but depending on where the sensitive information is, where the risk is, you implement your controls accordingly. And that's the reason risk assessment is really important. So, and when it comes to phishing, I know we all are in the same boat. Now there are specific phishing attacks to bypass two-factor authentication. So you will see a phishing, which is harvest your credentials, and they will prompt the user to enter second factor. Now, assuming that you are sending people home right now, they are new to two-factor, they will fall for it. It is very important to review alerts from your second factor solution, whatever you are using, and they have to be correlated with the normal behavior of the user. And these are some of the hard lessons learned. Back to you, Kaushik.
Thanks a lot, Rishi. And as rightly said, the risk assessment is so much important right now across the organizations. Which actually, so if you guys have any questions, please start posting it right now. We are available to answer your questions. And on the same note, actually, once I guess I was reading somewhere where we saw that alarms are many, but the security analysts are very few. Where I'm talking specifically about requirement 10 about the let's say about the log monitoring and all these things, where a particular model was suggested, which was known as SOAR, which talks about security orchestration, automation, response. So what it used to do is that it used to convert many manual tasks into automated workflows, so that let's say the response to any of the security threats, security intelligence at the end of the day is let's say investigated and let's say implemented or let's say resolved in a timely manner as well. That was something which actually I read. And apart from that, when we are talking about requirement 12, we are talking about the contractual agreements and all those things. One particular scenario, let's say one particular, let's say caveat, which organizations are facing at this particular point in time is supply chain management. I believe one particular use case which I read is that many of the organizations are considering, or I should exactly say that 30% of the organization, based upon the particular survey, 30% of the organizations are actually thinking about changing their supply chain management, the entire policy, and even the vendors which are a part of the supply chain management at the end of the day. Maybe because this pandemic and the epidemic, whatever these guys are facing. Believe me or not, but 80% of those leaders, because when I'm talking about leaders, I'm talking about the CFOs, CIOs and all, as per the survey, 80% of them were actually thinking about global recession at some point in time because of these attacks, whatever are coming. So do we have any questions right now? Do you guys have any questions which you want to just shoot up at us?
Kaushik, there was a question on the chat from Nirav Shah. I hope we have addressed that. Just checking.
Yes, we have. Okay, I believe this particular question, okay, I didn't address it earlier. So the question is that, is PCI requirement for ASV flexible if we extend our VA or ASV testing recommended by PCI requirements? I'm not sure what exactly you are trying to portray. What I can understand, I'll just tell you that if, let's say, you are extending your office or let's say your data center VLAN to these work from home agents as well by using an IPsec VLAN, IPsec VPN connection, where you'll be using a static IP which you actually gave it so that they can, let's say, have a continuous connection to your office premises. At that time, you will be able to perform an internal VA of those, let's say, of those agent system. However, ASV will not be applicable because whenever they are going from, let's say, from your office or let's say from their agents premises or let's say from their office premises to, let's say, the organization, to the customer, they're always going through your firewall. So they're always taking your public IP and going to the customer's premises. So at that time, the firewall IP, the public IP, which you use to scan as a part of your ASV will still be applicable. So I hope I was able to answer your question about the VA and the PT and the other stuff. All right. I guess that's it from our end, team. We don't have anything further in nature. Okay, we have one more question where we say that, okay, in Mexico, we have standards such as ISO 27000 and ISO 22301. Do you have any additional recommendations to prevent an attack risk, such as those described by ISO? I can comment on it. However, I'll see that Rishi, if you want to take this up, and of course, I will comment after that. Rishi?
Just looking at it. So ISO 27001 or ISO 22301, I'll tell you the basic difference between the PCI and ISO standards. ISO standards are very, very, I would say, descriptive in nature, very, very high level. Although they talk about all the best practices in the world, but they give the discretion to you, whether you want to implement based on the risk assessment. Now, ISO has been very, very generous also, because even if you consider that a risk, you can get a risk acceptance from the management. Now, that is very foolish of us these days, because you still get ISO certified, but you may be missing some significant controls. And that's the reason I was saying security first, compliance later. So, and if you look at PCI, they're very, very prescriptive. What needs to be done is clearly documented. So you can't really get away with that. So if take the best practices of ISO and implement them in real sense with true intent. Can you get ISO certified without implementing too many controls? The answer is yes. Can you get ISO certified by implementing all the controls in the world? Yes, the answer is yes. Now you have to strike a balance. And that's the reason risk assessment plays a very, very important role. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rishi. And just to take a few answers, a few pointers from Rishi, what exactly he said. So basically, if you are taking care of ISO 27001 and ISO 22301, although I'm not, let's say, means of course these are one of the industry best standards which are available in the market. However, it entirely, as Rishi rightly said, it depends upon your risk assessment. Now, if there are any security controls or any other requirements, any things over there which you have accepted as a risk, you didn't even implement any controls, or you have very high risk appetite at the end of the day, then I believe that whatever controls you didn't implement, that is something which you should implement. Taking care, or let's say taking into perspective or taking into reference the PCI DSS security requirements, which we just we can say discussed, which more talks about confidentiality of data rather than integrity or availability of data. Means of course it talks about integrity and availability, but in a lesser sense as compared to the confidentiality of the data. So I believe you can take a few control security requirements from here. However, if you haven't accepted any risk over there and you have made sure that, okay, all security requirements and all the risks have been treated, and let's say your organization has made sure that everything is full intact and everything, then I guess you have achieved that particular level. It shouldn't be an issue. But it's always best to refer to the other security standards as well. PCI is one of them. And I believe right now, many of the organizations are planning to follow the NIST cybersecurity framework, the NIST cybersecurity framework. So I guess at the end of the day, if you want to have a look at it, please go ahead and have a look at it. That will also help you. So I guess we have covered all the questions and answers what were there. So we'll just end this particular, let's say presentation, or let's say this particular session on the tips to privacy. That now try to understand people that people are the biggest factor when we are talking about any of the security workforce. So create security culture within the organization. That is very, very important, because that is how basically you will be giving the access to work from home employees based upon the awareness which you have given to them. Process, it's very important to effectively monitor and manage process and access controls and the technology through which you will be able to limit the data exposure and thereby reducing scope and validation. So on that particular note, I will just ask Rishi if you have some concluding notes over here to present, and accordingly we'll just wind up. Rishi?
Yeah. So team, I just have one note. The location is changing for people. Responsibility is not. So responsibility to the customer remains the same, irrespective whether you operate. As future is all about gig economies, remote workers, COVID-19, I won't say it is a blessing, but this will teach a huge lesson to all of us and remove some of the mental blocks. If we can work from home, we cannot work from home. Can we get same assurance in working at home? So let's continue to serve our customers and provide them security. Security first, compliance later. Compliance will automatically come. That's my concluding remark.
Sure, Rishi, thanks a lot. And whosoever means, if let's say we were not able to address any questions, or if you have any questions, then please send out an email to ari.kr@sisainfosec.com. And soon enough, we'll just get back to you with all your questions answered. So I guess on that note, we'll just end this session. Thanks a lot, team. Please stay safe and have a very nice day ahead. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.